Good evening and welcome to the PVUSD board meeting. We do have translation in Spanish. If you need that support, please see Urania Lopez. This meeting will be live streamed and recorded. If someone would like to speak to an item on the agenda, they must complete a speaker card and submit it to Ever Renteria prior to the agenda item. Once an item has begun, cards will not be accepted for that item. Each speaker will have 2 minutes with the total time for public input on each agenda item to 30 minutes maximum. Now I will move us to item 3.2. For the Pledge of Allegiance, I will ask Trustee Bolano-Scow to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
All right, please salute. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Trustee Bolano-Scow. Now I will move us to item 4.1, approval of agenda. Can I have a motion to approve the agenda?
Move to approve.
Second.
I have a first, I have a second. I will call for the vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That will carry on a 5-0-2. Action on report 5.1, action report on closed session. Are there any items to report from closed session? No, we do not have any items reported out of closed session this evening. I will now move us to item 6, our consent agenda. Consent items are routine items coming before the board. Any public speakers to the consent agenda? Seeing none, are there any items that the board wishes to defer? I would like to defer consent agenda item 6.8, so I'll make a motion to approve the agenda, the consent agenda with deferring item 6.8. Can I have a second on the remaining items?
Second.
So I have a first, a second. I will call for the vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none, or any abstaining, sorry. That will carry 5-0-2. So the deferred consent agenda item for 6.8, they accept the donation from Vallarta Supermarkets for Calabasas Elementary, Lakeview Middle School, and Watsonville High School. I just wanted to take this opportunity to recognize and welcome Vallarta Supermarkets to our community and thank Vallarta Supermarket for their donation to Calabasas Elementary, Lakeview Middle School, and Watsonville High. And with that, I will make a motion to approve this consent agenda item 6.8. Can I have a second?
A second, and
any further comments?
Second, your comments. I got to go to an opening at Vallarta. It's a beautiful place, very positive for our community, and my understanding is they like to be tied in with the community, so already proven it. 3 great schools, and that place is packed, so thank you to Vallarta.
Yes, they did have, my husband and I were able to attend their opening as well, and it was wonderful, and to meet the owners. So again, thank you to Vallarta Supermarket. So we have a first, we have a second. Any other discussion on that item? All right, then I will call for the vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? That will carry 5-0-2. All right, and that was, yes. I'll move us to item, our public hearings tonight. We have for 8.1, I will open the public hearing for the draft of the 24-25 Local Accountability Plan, and this report will be presented by our Assistant Sup of Secondary Education, Ms. Lisa Aguirre, and I believe with some support.
Good evening. Thank you so much for having us this evening. I am, of course, the Executive Director for Teaching and Learning, but I'm also a member of our District Advisory Committee, and I am here with representatives of our District Advisory Committee here tonight, and so I'd like them to introduce themselves, and they're also going to be speaking to some of our slides.
Hi, my name is Selene Avila, and I am part of the DAC.
What school do you represent?
I'm representing Calabasas Elementary School.
Hello, my name is Noemi Munoz, and I am a student representative of Aptos High School for the District Advisory Committee.
Good evening. My name is Adrienne Romero. I am a mother representing Ansoldo Elementary School.
And I am so honored to have them all here with us tonight because they've been vital members of this process. So I'm going to move us ahead on our slides. So this is our new LCAP, and it's connected to our PVUSD mission. Our new LCAP aligns, of course, to our district, there we go, to our district goals. The LCAP development process is led for us by California's 8 state priorities. So we follow those state priorities as we work with our community to develop our LCAP. Our LCAP is focused on supplemental and concentration funding. And attached to tonight's agenda are the components of the LCAP that you see listed on the slide as well.
This year, the work of our District Advisory Committee, also known as DAC, was to review our current LCAP that we went through the 23-24 school year and determine what is working, what we should change, and what we needed to add. This year's LCAP is a 3-year LCAP for school years 2020, for this year's LCAP is a 3-year LCAP for school years 24-25, 25-26, and 26-27. The District Advisory Committee is made up of parent representatives, I'm one of them, from site councils, students, community members, education partners from higher education, and district staff. Several of us are here tonight as a very collaborative process. We met monthly to analyze district data, provide feedback on the current LCAP and its effectiveness, and to assist the district LCAP team in developing the LCAP goals and action steps. These are the members of the district's LCAP team, if you see the slide up ahead. We had 9 DAC meetings in the evenings. Then DAC representatives presented to their home site councils and shared that information with DAC at the next meeting. District leaders then gave presentations to different district stakeholder groups. Thank you.
We had 3 big community meetings, including translations in Spanish, English, and Mixteco. We had 3 surveys available in English, Spanish for students, staff, families, and the community. There were a variety of ways for the community to engage with the LCAP process. This is Evelyn presenting the Radcliffe Elementary Site Council feedback to our District Advisory Committee. This is a Spanish with English translation community meeting at Pajaro Valley High School in February. This is a snapshot of the Google survey we made available to anyone in the community in February and March.
So in our new CAP goals, we have 5 LCAP goals that apply to students district-wide. And then we have 3 LCAP goals that specifically apply to new school students, Renaissance students, and virtual academy students. The reason why we have those 3 LCAP goals are specifically applied to those schools is that they're equity multiplier schools, which means that they have a high mobility rate and a high socioeconomically disadvantaged rate.
The first 2 goals are broad goals for the whole district. The first broad goal is about academic success and college and career readiness for all students. The second broad goal is about positive school cultures and family engagement. The action steps in goals 1 and 2 include action steps to support CTE and VAPA. We no longer have specific CTE and VAPA goals because we were successful in growing those programs through our previous LCAP. Now, CTE and VAPA are the same as math, science, English language arts, since they are core academic programs that are supported through our LCAP. We also have focused goals to support foster youth, special education, and multilingual learners. The first two goals are district-wide for all students, with goals 3 through 8 focused on specific subgroups or schools.
Goal 1 is focused on academic success for all students. Goal 2 focuses on school culture and climate, campus safety, and welcoming families into the school community. Goal 3 focuses on supporting the needs of our foster youth and their unique needs. Goal 4 focuses on supporting the needs of our special education students and their unique needs. Goal 5 focuses on supporting the needs of our multilingual learners and their unique needs.
So the goals that specifically apply to New School Renaissance and Virtual Academy was developed looking at the California dashboard. The California dashboard is something that we look at to see how our district is doing. As a barometer, we use this through the whole process with all of our goals, but specifically for these 3 goals, what exactly is needed. For New School and Renaissance, the goal is, it's about increasing student graduation, increasing student engagement, and also increasing the attendance rate at the schools. Virtual Academy, we're looking at improving ELA and mathematics, the scores of the students as measured by the CAS test score, specifically for our socioeconomically disadvantaged students and our Latinx students. And then, oh yes, the Virtual Academy attendance. We also are looking at increasing the attendance of our Virtual Academy students. So that is goal 8.
So the next step in this process is anyone in the community can look at our LCAP. It's on our district website. We have a feedback form that will go out tomorrow on our website. We also have paper copies available of that in our lobby receiving area. And they'll have from tomorrow morning through the 24th to provide their feedback. And then on the 26th, we'll come back to the regular scheduled board meeting and seek your approval on our LCAP. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any public speakers on this item? Seeing none, I will bring it back to the board for questions, comments, and deliberation. Trustee Milano-Scow.
Thank you for this, all your work. Thank you for this great summary. I did have a question. I'm just looking through the actual LCAP, which is a big, big document. I had a question about the graduation rates, where they are, where they've been, where we want them to go, and how do we, for the public, what is the graduation rate? How do we calculate that?
So the graduation rate is looking at the cohort of students that start within the 9th grade. So you have a cohort of students that go through. The state determines when the cutoff date is for the graduation. And so for this year, it's June 30th, I believe. So all students that go through and they complete their high school credits by June 30th, then that determines the graduation rate. So for this year, it's still being calculated. We still have students that are completing their work and so making sure that we increase our graduation rate. Within the document, it lists our baseline is from last year, and then it lists where we want to be at the end of the 3 years.
So I'm looking at the document here, and I don't know if it's handy, or we can, next Wednesday if it's better, but it says status 88.8%, indicator medium. What does that stuff mean?
Okay, so this, so that's coming off the California dashboard.
Okay.
So your status is what % of our students overall, so that's a district-wide, has the graduation rate, which was 88.8%. And then you said medium, right?
Indicator medium.
The indicator medium. So you have a very low, low, medium, high, and very high. And so all depends on the graduation rate of that. That is assigned by the state, that temperature.
And how do we compare to the state average?
For last year, I don't know the state average off the top of my head. I don't know. We can get that to you.
Okay, thanks. That's my main question right now. I might, next Wednesday, I might have some follow-ups too. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Bolano-Scow. Anyone else? Trustee Flores.
I just wanted to say thank you for this presentation, and thank you for taking your time out to be here tonight to present to us, and all the time you put into being on the committee. I just want to say thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Flores. Trustee DeSerpa.
Hi, can we talk about goal number 8, Virtual Academy?
Yes, we can.
So I know that we had sunsetted part of the Virtual Academy program, but we still have a program running, is that correct?
Yes, the virtual academy next year will be 8th through 12th grade. For the attendance is not calculated by students who attend because it's virtual. Attendance is calculated by the completion of assignments. And so if a student completed 80% of their assignments, that means that for that week, they were marked 4 out of 5 days present. There was a glitch in terms of reporting in CalPads. We're looking at it, there was a component that wasn't reported correctly, and in doing so, that the attendance rate was lower than it had been in the past. So it's all based on the completion of assignments. So if you look at the action items are aligned with goal number 7, and the reason for that is because it's about the completion of the assignments and not necessarily being at school.
So, how do I want to put this? So if there was a problem with the reporting in the system, then does that mean because our attendance looked lower than maybe what it was, that we got paid less ADA on those students?
In doing so, what we reported to the state is exactly what we can show that what we proved. Whether the part that was a question of whether all the assignments were turned in, we cannot prove and show that that was the case, but that's what we believe. So what's reported to the state is what we have documentation for, and what is we can say is 100% accurate, even though there may be something else, but that's what we report, is what we have evidence for.
So along the same lines, in terms of improving attendance overall, are we still able to do any of the Saturday school programs like we had been doing so robustly at one time?
Well, I believe there's a report that will be coming out from Dr. Contreras, who has an amazing plan, and so I don't want to steal her thunder, but
That's okay.
there is a lot, and Dr. Contreras has a great plan coming up that's going to address it.
Okay, great.
But she
I'll
brings her
hold for
knowledge.
that.
Yep.
And then to the people who are here speaking who aren't staff, the moms, the student, are you both moms and one student? So thank you so much for being here. I know it's a lot, and thank you for participating all year long. It's such a commitment, and because you're such astute, you're interested, you want to help the district and help the kids be the best, I would encourage you to run for office. I think you should run for one of these seats up here, both of you. Seriously. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee DeSerpa. Trustee Dr. Holm?
I just want to echo my, colleagues' sentiments and express my appreciation for the time that you've spent on the District Advisory Council. It's, they've already said it eloquently, but your work is seen and appreciated, and I want to acknowledge that. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Dr. Holm. And I just pretty much want to echo the same. the appreciation for you to commit to that year-long process, and I hope you continue, and that it was a good experience as well for you, and super appreciative of that because we really need that community and parent and student input, right? That's a crucial element of this, so thank you very much for that. With that, were there any other questions or comments or discussion from the board? Then I'll thank you and give you the mercy of time back and say that'll be that for that presentation. Thank you so much. Have a good evening. I'll now move us to 8.2, review of the 24-25 proposed budget and statement of reasons above minimum reserve for economic uncertainty. This report will be presented by our Director of Fiscal Services and Interim CBO, Ms. Im. Welcome. Thank you.
Good evening, President Acosta, Board of Trustees, Superintendent Dr. Contreras. My name is Jenny Im, Director of Fiscal Services, and I'm here to present the public hearing of our 24-25 proposed budget and statement of reserves. So I love this new format where we're starting off with our collective why to educate and to support learners in reaching their highest potential. And so we saw the LCAP before, and the reason the LCAP and the budget are brought simultaneously together is because we can't build one without the other. The LCAP, as we saw, show how we are using our supplemental and concentration dollars to really start moving the dial for our students, increasing and improving services. So as we're building the LCAP, we're at the same time building the budget. So as I just said before, the purpose of this presentation is to bring this proposed budget for public hearing to solicit public comment. We saw this slide at second interim, so I wanted to bring it back just to highlight how amazing our district is and all the exciting initiatives that we've been doing. One new thing that I wanted to really especially call out is that we have been awarded the NAM Foundation's Best Communities for Music Education Award. We are the only district in Santa Cruz County that is the recipient of this award. So I think our Stephanie Monroe, Dr. R, and Lisa Claudia have really done an amazing job with the direction of the board. So I think we can be really proud of this achievement. And also our Food and Nutrition Department has just been recognized by the Community Health Trust of Pajaro Valley for their work in uplifting the community. So I am so proud to be a part of this district. So as we go through the slides, I just wanted to point out that many of the slide formats will be familiar, and that's because many of these slides are so integral to the understanding of how the budget is built. So I'm hoping that over time, a lot of this information, the board and the community, we are going to know this like the back of our hand. And with each new budget presentation, my hope is to bring a new element into it, so we'll kind of see that towards the back. So what this slide shows is the impact of the state's budget process on the district's budget. So in May, the governor just came out with the May revision budget update. We'll be going over some of those impacts on the next slide. So now we are bringing our proposed budget. And one thing I wanted to state is that school districts have to adopt their adopted budget before the state adopts their budget. So we saw some of the impacts in 22-23, 23-24. There were reductions in certain one-time dollars. We saw that at the state level, there were revenue shortfalls. So we're hoping that this year we won't see those major impacts, but there are some shifts that we can expect. So with the governor's May revision, there's been not too many shifts from the January budget proposal. One of the big items is what they're calling the early action plan. So as we saw, the budget shortfall, it's not just in 1 year. So we saw at second interim the budget shortfall span 3 fiscal years, 22-23, 23-24, and the upcoming 24-25 year. So the last 2 years, the budget shortfall, it was mostly due to the fact that the tax deadline got moved to November. So when the state enacted their budget, they didn't realize that they were going to have an operational deficit. So they were funding programs at a higher rate than they really were able to. So right now, the state is trying to figure out how do we fill those gaps in those last 2 years and still kind of maintain our funding levels for the coming year. Luckily, Governor Newsom is really trying to, I think, protect K through 12 education. So he's coming up with all sorts of different accounting maneuvers, including a deal that he just reached with California Teachers Association to essentially pull money from the reserves and pay back in essentially a payment plan starting in 25-26. So one of the things that we'll have to remember when the state enacts a budget at the end of June, beginning of July, is we still don't know the details a lot of these maneuvers. So one of the concerns is some of these maneuvers might not be legal. There's not a lot of precedent for it, so there's some pushback from the legislators. So we'll kind of see how it plays out. So 24-25, the COLA has increased slightly. Second interim was 0.76%. Now it's 1.07%. On the next slide, we'll kind of see why that's not truly impacting our per pupil funding levels. There's no new one-time funding or grants, unfortunately. And part of what the governor is doing in his early action plan and also with the modified agreement with CTA is borrowing $8.4 billion from the school rainy day fund. By 24-25, the state is expecting that reserve is going to be fully depleted. So even though 24-25, the COLA has increased slightly from 0.76 at second interim to 1.07 now with the May revision, because that budget shortfall spanned 22, 23, 23, 24, and now this new year, what that's essentially done is it's lowered each year's Prop 98 base funding levels. So what that's doing is essentially the per pupil amount, it's shifting. So that's what the governor and the legislator are still in talks about of how to address this. So we can see at the January budget per pupil, the base per pupil funding amount was actually slightly higher than the amount at the May revision. So we saw this slide at second interim. I wanted to bring it back just to show how even though the COLAs right now seem a lot lower than they were during COVID, it truly is a return to normal. We can see during COVID, and we saw at second interim, the reason why we had those big COLAs and also a lot of those one-time dollars was because the impacts from our capital gains was so large during that time period. So we saw a large number of, we talked about how the 1% earners in California brought in more than half of the general fund dollars. So now we're starting to see that return to normal. And this slide is just a representation of all of the one-time COVID-19 relief dollars as well as the post-pandemic block grants. So with the ESSER dollars sunsetting in September and no new one-time block grants in the May revision budget, I think one thing we'll have to keep in mind is we won't really have this cushion going forward anymore. During COVID, PVUSD received upwards of, over the 3-4 year span, upwards of $100 million. So a lot of that went to brand new support, staffing, services. But some of that, because ESSER was truly unique, it was restricted funding, but it had some broad uses that were allowable. So because of that, it was able to give the district a little bit of a cushion. So now with that going away, we'll have to be more cognizant of one-time funded services and staffing and how we will continue to provide those services. When we're building the budget, the most important planning factor will be enrollment and EDA. We talked about some of the impacts from the governor's May revision, as well as ongoing versus one-time expenses. And for school districts all across California, our number one expenditure are in our people, so salaries and benefits. For PV, out of our general fund, unrestricted side, it's about 90% of our total expenditures. And I think this is one of the slides I hope as a school community that we are coming to see and understand, as well as the back of our hand. Unfortunately, like many districts in California, we are seeing the declining enrollment. So with actuals coming in from 23-24, we've seen about a 16% decline in enrollment of almost 3,000 students in the past decade. According to projections at the state and county level, that is going to continue in the next decade as well. And we can start to see as well that we are funded, the district is funded on a rolling 3-year average for our ADA. That's called the funded ADA. During COVID, we received certain ADA protections where we were held harmless. That is starting to go away. So we are losing the protection of the higher pre-COVID ADA years. So as we can see, the top blue line is our funded ADA. The bottom red line is our actual ADA. So we can see during really 21-22 to 23-24, the variance between the two was pretty great. So we were getting funded at a much higher rate than our actual ADA. And as that 3-year ADA rolling average starts to get smaller and smaller, we can start to see that the difference between where we're funded and our actual ADA is starting to close. So we're starting to see that we're getting funded closer to our actual ADA. So that ADA cliff that you might have heard about, it just got pushed out a little bit further, but we're fast approaching it. And when we're thinking about the LCFF COLA, I think that the best way to think about this is we can't look at it as just a straight percentage. We need to evaluate the actual revenue that we're receiving. So as we can see in the LCFF COLA for 24-25, even though the COLA states we're receiving 1.07%, if we take into the declining enrollment and the ADA changes, we can actually see that from 23-24, we are projecting almost an $11 million LCFF revenue decline. So we're receiving $11 million less than we have in 23-24. So when we look at the realized COLA, it's actually a negative 4.60 in our unrestricted general fund. The reason why this is so important is because our LCFF dollars, that's the bread and butter of school districts. This is the biggest source of revenue that we have, and the source of revenue that we use to fund our ongoing general education program, all of our centralized expenditures, and our operating expenditures. Some other really important factors when we're building the budget are the assumptions around our benefits. So we can see here our ongoing CalSTRS and CalPERS rates. So these are the additional rates that the district pays for every single employee on top of the salaries and health and welfare. So we can see CalSTRS It's pretty steady at this point. We're not hearing of any intention of this to increase through the multi-year projection. The CalPERS rates, however, have been increasing steadily each year. So we can see by 26-27, the state is projecting that it's going to increase to 28%, and that's due to the large unfunded liability at the state level. Health and welfare this year has increased 10% over the prior year. Our initial estimate that we got is that it's going to increase 8% next year, so that's been built into the budget, and then 5%, 4% in the next 2 years. Currently, because negotiations have not settled, we have not included any projected increases for next year or the next 2 years. As we get a better sense, we will be communicating that to the board and including any increases. And at second interim, we had spoken about the path to a sustainable budget. So the first phase of that was going to be looking at the current year and really looking at every single line of expenditure, which my staff has diligently done in conjunction and collaboration with other departments and our sites. And we were able to reclassify expenditures out of our unrestricted into restricted programs or into other funds. A lot of these expenditure reclassifications were related to technology and our maintenance and operations routine maintenance. We also are seeing some savings just from sites and departments closing out their budgets. Some savings that were intentional that they wanted to start reducing and start seeing some savings. And some of the savings are just from sites and departments not using all of their budget for the year. We also saw a little bit of interest income increase. We are seeing right now the highest interest rates since 2006, 2007, which is great for us. And then we had budgeted an anticipated audit adjustment from 22-23 of 1.6 million. We've been working with our auditors. They've been really, really supportive and collaborative, and we've been able to reduce that audit adjustment. So these one-time savings, came out to about 7.4 million. I just wanted to point out that these are one-time savings seen in 23-24. It's going to fall to our fund balance and increase our reserves to help us get through the next couple of years. And this slide is our multi-year projection on the unrestricted side. I wanted to draw your eyes to that row in red. What that represents is our projected budget shortfall next year and the next 2 years. So we can see for 23-24 in the very left-hand column, because of the phase one savings that we were able to implement, we are actually ending this year in the black. And then for 24-25, we are expecting to deficit spend about 6.2 million, and then increasing to 14 million in the 2 out years. And this slide is a visual representation of the components of our ending fund balance to show the portion in red is our minimum 3% reserve, and then our committed, assigned, and unassigned amounts. And we can start to see that out of our unrestricted ending fund balance, it's starting to get smaller in the out years. And this slide is showing the general fund restricted side. I wanted to point out that differently than what's happening in unrestricted, on the restricted, this deficit spending is planned. And that's due to we received millions of dollars in those one-time block grants, mainly the arts, music, instructional materials, and we have the learning recovery emergency block grant. and some other block grants, including E through G. So those we received all up front, but they were meant to be spent over a multi-year period. So many of these have plans that were brought to the board and approved. So they're sitting in our fund balance, but meant to be spent over the next 3 to 5 years. And this slide shows just our total combined reserves. There's been a lot of interest in the school community wanting to know exactly what makes up our restricted ending fund balance. So I wanted to break it out to show all of the grants that make up that ending fund balance. And we had talked about this at first and second interim, but one really good thing to remember is our restricted fund balance. 100% of that, because it's tied to specific grants, there are very specific allowable uses. And the committed amounts in yellow, we will be seeing that brought forward as action items later on in the night. So one of the additional committed items, back in 16-17, the board had committed an additional 3% at that time. So it was at 16-17 levels. So now with the state reserve projected to be fully depleted by 25-26, our reserves starting to potentially be depleted, I think it would be very, very smart of the district to increase our additional reserves. So the additional reserves would bring us from 3% at 16-17 levels to now 3% at 24-25 levels. There's a really great saying that reserves don't solve problems, but they just give us a little bit time to come up with a good solution. So I'm very thankful for the reserves that we have because now we're able to really go forward and implement the phase 2 and come up with the budget advisory committee and really work with the community and the board. The second commitment I'll be bringing to you later on will be to temporarily commit some reserves just for the 24-25 year to be lifted at the end of the 24-25 year, and that is to preserve our staffing levels while we're projected to deficit spend. And because we saw the LCAP earlier, I wanted to give a little bit of framework on how we can think about funding and how we use funding to build our educational programs. So one of the really important things when we look at every source of funding is looking at, is the intention of this funding to support our base general education program? Or is it meant to increase or improve services or to provide supplemental services? So it's looking at that layer of the gen ed program, and then how are we laying services on top to address equity? So as we're looking at the LCAP, so this is equity through a fiscal lens on a district-wide level. So there's many definitions of equity, but I like to think of it as recognizing that there are disparities in outcome and opportunities. So I like to think of this as a pyramid. So if you start from the bottom, that's our base general education program. So our unrestricted LCFF revenues are supporting our gen ed teachers, our core instructional programs, our centralized services like HR, finance, M&O, our operating cost facilities, as well as core curriculum adoptions, instructional materials. And then the next layer we can think about is our LCFF supplemental and concentration dollars. So this is also part of our unrestricted, but we receive these dollars based on our unduplicated pupil counts. And these dollars are what is tied to our LCAP. It's meant to increase or improve services for our unduplicated students. So because of all the supplemental concentration dollars that we receive, we are able to provide really amazing services and supports at this district that many other districts, even in our county, aren't able to provide. So with these dollars, we're able to have released teachers, smaller class size ratios, even smaller than what we're actually contracted to, bilingual stipends, assistant principals, ACs, instructional aides, athletic supports. I believe we're one of the only districts that I know of that actually provide district-supported athletic supports, which is amazing. And that's just some of what we're able to do with these dollars. And then the next level of support are really the ongoing restricted state and federal grants and programs. So that's all of our title programs. We have a lot of self-sustaining programs as well that are almost fully or partially funded by restricted grants. So our Migrant Ed, Migrant Seasonal Head Start, CTE, Special Education, Expanded Learning, Food and Nutrition, Prop 28, and more. So a lot of these special grants and funding sources, there's supplement versus supplant rules, specific allowable uses, and some of them we have to apply for each year, and some we meet depending on eligibility criteria. And then on the very top, we receive one-time restricted funding and block grants, and those also have specific allowable uses. And then from there, I wanted to drill down a little bit further. So through school site-based budgeting, the district gives our school sites their discretionary allocations. The reason for this is the same reason that we receive our LCFF dollars, local control. So the state gives school districts money through LCFF because the state believes that school districts know what our community needs the most. We know better than at the state level. And that carries further. So from the district level, we then disperse money to each school site because that concept follows. Each individual school community knows their school community best. So when you see the SIPSA come forward on the 26th, that is what that process says. It's each school site looking at their discretionary allocations, working with their school community to figure out how can we best move the dial for kids and provide those supports that are much needed. So for the Road to Sustainable Budget Plan, we have just done phase 1. We are currently in process of phase 2. So in August, we will be bringing a report item to board to seek board input on establishing our district values, as well as clear and transparent guidelines around establishing the Budget Advisory Committee, as well as the phase 2 of the Sustainable Budget Plan. So next steps, the proposed budget will be brought back to the board on June 26th for approval and adoption for a positive certification, as well as in August, the report item outlining the next phase of the Sustainable Budget Plan. And I just wanted to say a big thank you to the fiscal staff, as well as all the department heads and principals and program managers. And I will open up to any public comments.
Thank you. Do we have any public comments? Seeing none, I will bring it back to the board for discussion, questions, comments, and deliberation. Trustee Dr. Holm.
I just wanted to check my math with you on like the reductions in the LCFF funding. Is that a combination of that reduced amount and the fewer the projected ADA? Is that where that's coming? So the expected reduction of it's about a little over almost 11 million.
So that's a really great question. Most of that reduction is actually due to declining enrollment in our funded ADA. The average 3-year ADA that's getting used getting smaller and smaller. So the Prop 98 base funding, we don't truly know the full effects of that yet until the state enacts their budget. Right now, we're using a calculation tool from the state. So that small decrease that we saw in 24-25, that is factored in. But most of the $6 million shortfall next year and the $16 million in the 2 out years, that's due to the declining enrollment.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Dr. Holm. Anyone else? Trustee Flores.
Thank you so much for this presentation. I had a question about the community school grants that will be coming in. When will we see that reflected in our budget?
Oh, yeah, so we will see that likely at first interim. At the time when we were almost done finishing our budget development, we had not yet received the letter of guarantee. We had heard that we were recipients, but typically we don't budget until we receive, it's called the GAN letter. And right now with the community schools, because there's going to be a lot going into developing the actual programming around it. So that's going to take a little bit more time, but I believe first interim, so we'll see that around December. Great question, though. Thank you.
Is that it, Trustee Flores? Thank you, Trustee Flores. Anyone else? Trustee DeSerpa.
Thank you. So the California state budget is not yet in place. I think the legislature sent it to the governor, and there's still a bunch of backroom negotiations going on.
Yes.
I worked really hard with my CSBA delegates to work with our local legislators to inform them about the maneuver that they were trying to do, which we all think is probably illegal. So just for the public and the community to know that I met with our state legislators to make sure that they understood that we were not in favor of that maneuver. So because we've had declining enrollment, have we correspondingly tightened up staffing, teachers and staffing and supplies and et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah, so for staffing, each year due to declining enrollment, we do right size according to what the need is. So that's factored into the budget right now. And then in terms of things like supplies, services, absolutely. So all of our site discretionary allocations are based on the prior year CalPADS enrollment. So that's adjusted according to each school's enrollment factor, and then all the departments as well.
And as you and the new superintendent are going through the budget line by line by line, are you already seeing places that we could, I mean, I did see the slide about the $7 million, but are there other things, other positions that can be either frozen or eliminated at this point so that we can tighten up the budget?
Yes, so we're seeing some great opportunity for both restructuring through that way, as well as rethinking and utilizing our different funding sources in a different manner. So there's some really exciting restructuring that we're thinking of for over the summer. So we'll be bringing that to board hopefully in July and August.
Okay, so I would just caution, having gone through this before, that we start this process sooner than later, forecasting in the future about what is the potential that could be the worst case scenario, so that we're not left with a budget that goes negative.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee DeSerpa. Trustee Bolano-Scow.
Yes, thank you for this great presentation. About these assumptions in declining enrollment, my understanding is that we use a consultant to make these projections. Is that true? And can you describe who that person is and how they figure this out?
Sure. So the demographer that the district has used for the last several years, I believe, it's called Power Schools Decision Insight. So right now, what's been interesting is a lot of demographers use something called a weighted cohort survival method. What that means is the years closest to the years that you're projecting are weighted more heavily than the out years. So what we're seeing during COVID especially is because COVID accelerated enrollment loss, and it really took us out of a normal sense of pattern. So because of the weighted formula, what we've noticed is the enrollment has been more off. the last couple of years. So what we've been doing at the district level is we are looking at the demographers' enrollment projections because they're able to look at things like birth rates, impacts of possible developments in the area, things like that. So we're looking at those factors, but we're also looking at our local data and doing our own cohort survival method projections and blending the two.
Because I'm just looking at the last 2 years. So at the actuals for 22-23, it said 15,907. For the actuals for 23-24, 15,411. And the projection says it's going to go, now it's about 500 students going down. And now it says projections like going down 700 students. And we have these new TK programs coming in. So wouldn't we expect, or wouldn't somebody might expect that that might help enrollment, or no?
That's a really, really great question. The TK implementation is, I believe, over 5 years. So it has masked a little bit of the enrollment projections, but after the 5-year implementation process, it's going to flatline a little bit. And what we're starting to see is there are what we call grade bubbles. So what we're starting to see is the outgoing grades are a lot bigger than the incoming grades. So that's part of the reason why we're starting to see the enrollment loss starting to increase each year. It's because the outgoing grades are much bigger than the ones coming in, and that's going to continue to be a pattern due to declining enrollment.
So it, and obviously it's different school by school by school by school. So like, one school, Calabasas, they have a lot of migrant community, and so the enrollment fluctuates quite a bit. And so last I looked, it was actually the same as pretty much depending on when you count. And then I saw one projection earlier that it's going to go down like by 100 kids or something like that. I know that's very specific. So but my question, I guess, in these assumptions, how do I guess we have to make some kind of assumption. And do we factor it in school by school by school, and then how? And is there a risk that that if we project too much loss, do we understaff? Do we put ourselves in a pickle and scramble, or do we do combo classes at the very last minute, the day before school starts, move a teacher and create a havoc at some school? I don't know if this might have happened last year, is why I'm bringing it up, because it actually did. So.
And I think it's absolutely a delicate balance. So kind of the first part of your question, we do look at per school. We look at it grade level by grade level. As part of the cohort survival projection method, what we do is we look at the basis years. So we're looking at, if we're looking at the last 5 years or the last 10 years to kind of establish the standard. So we're looking at each grade span, and what we're doing is we're seeing what is the percentage of that grade that moves on into the next year based on the last 5 or 10 years pattern. So we're using that to project the projected enrollment for the following year. Typically, what the best practices at a lot of school districts is you staff on a conservative enrollment. So it's absolutely easier to wait to staff according to a conservative enrollment count. You wait until the kids are actually in school on the first day to know what is actual enrollment. And it's always easier to, at that point, reassess and add teachers if necessary than be overstaffed and then we're in a bind. So it's a delicate balance of figuring out what is the closest enrollment we can get to so that we're staffed as closely to what we're actually needing so that there's as few of those adjustments as possible. But because kids don't come in those perfect class size ratio packages, there are absolutely situations when we might be over by 1 or 2 or 5 students, and then we're having to kind of reassess at that point once we actually have the students in the classrooms on the first day of school.
And if we need to right-size teachers, I would guess, but maybe I'm wrong, that we do that through non-reelection seniority. Is that kind of how the process goes, or per the contract, or am I mistaken?
Per the contract, and historically the district has been able to do most of the right sizing through attrition and resignations and retirements.
And I think this is my last question, thank you. On the chart, where had the big, with the 3-year projection, we're required to do 3-year projections where it shows the net increase, decrease going savings to 6 million to 14. That, of course, well, I don't know if of course, that's why I'm asking, does it actually, that assumes our expenditures are what they are now? Or?
So when I projected out the expenditures for salaries and health and welfare and statutories, I incorporated the projected increases for like our PERS and STIRS increases, our health and welfare increases. What I did for supplies and materials is we really did look through department by department, site by site to see what is really necessary. And then I applied an inflation factor that was recommended by the California School Services. That's the standard, industry standard that most school districts utilize. And for services, it's really looking at really contract by contract.
Thank you, Jenny. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Bolano-Scow. Great presentation, thank you. I want to note a couple things. You did have in your slide one of the comments regarding people, in other words, payroll, right? Being the largest expense to the district. And I just want to note that that's, not exclusive to PVUSD. That is typical of any employer, that their largest expense is their human capital, their people, their payroll, right?
Absolutely.
Private, public, corporate, across the world. I mean, it's typically the largest expense, so that's not something just exclusive to us at PVUSD. I also, in keeping on that thought, why do we see in the drop in the projected health and welfare on the projections for 25, 26, and 26, 27 versus 24, 25? What factors are playing into that we're expecting a drop, possibly?
So part of that is just we are seeing decreases on our FTE. So as our FTE decreases, because we offer such amazing health and welfare benefits, for 23, 24, for example, we offer up to a family PPO plan, pretty much at no cost to our employees. So that's about a $36,000 plan. So as our FTE decreases, each full-time employee, it's about that much that we would be taking out of our health and welfare.
And is it also factoring to one of the comments you made to Trustee Bolano-Scow with factoring in retirement, resignation, attrition, and maybe there being a freeze or a hold on certain positions as a possibility? Is that part of that factor as well, as that there would be by natural default, there is a reduction in employment?
Yes, so I did factor in, based on historic attrition with teachers, about a 20 FTE decrease in each year in the out years. Classified, with classified, it's a little bit different how we project out, because with teachers, the number of teachers that we need is tied to the number of classrooms. So that's relatively easy to project. With classified, because it might be, a principal or an office staff member or a custodial staff member. So they're tied to really entire schools, not particularly to classrooms. So for them, it doesn't attrition the same way as a certificated teacher would.
Okay, thank you for the clarification on that. And now the big doom and gloom, the declining enrollment, right? Which I've constantly said these are conversations that, we should have been having more than 5 or 6 years ago. It was inevitable. Everything was there to show that we were going to be in this time. And we saw you're talking about the hold harmless ADA that we had, that we got to enjoy, if you will, is the right word, experience during our COVID era, which is, again, I think a testimony to why our superintendent's attendance campaign is so important and crucial. One of the questions I had in regards to the declining enrollment, like the 24 to the 25 versus the 25 to 26, but yet we see an increase in projected debt spending in 25, 26, and 26, 27 versus 24, 25. Can you explain that to us a bit?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that last part one more time?
So we see the declining enrollment numbers from 24, 25, the 25, 26, 26, 27, which continues to decline more and more and more each projected year. Yet there is an increase in projected debt spending from 25, 26 and 26, 27 versus 24, 25. So can you just explain how those are working in the opposite
definitely.
directions? So if we're having a decline in enrollment, why are we having an increase in our debt spending?
That's a great question, and that's because as our enrollment is decreasing, our revenues are decreasing, but at the same time, the cost of keeping the lights on, of staffing, of the health and welfare increases, of those STRS and PERS rates, PG&E rates, those are increasing exponentially more. So what's happening is it's twofold. So in the out years, our revenues are decreasing, our expenditures are also increasing. So what's happening is our deficit spending is compounding at that point. So that's why we see that jump from the 6 million to the 16 million in the 2 out years.
And great, I appreciate the explanation, just so people can understand, because I think for natural, someone would think, well, if you're getting declining enrollment, then expenses are, going in the same direction. And your explanation as to why that's not happening, I appreciate that. And then I just have one follow-up question with regards to Trustee Flores' question regarding the community school grants that we've received, right? So those are grants to get like a one-time money type of thing. We're doing it. What happens when that's done? Where's the money going to come to continue to support that?
And that's so the community schools grant, it's a 5-year grant with a 2-year extension, so up to 7 years. So one of the goals of this grant is to build the infrastructure to support this framework going forward. So one of the things that we're thinking about with some of the community liaison positions is how do we integrate these positions and how do we possibly restructure where we're taking an existing need, maybe an existing, some of the existing job duties. Is there a possibility of integrating it with some of these positions? So I think right now we really are kind of at the beginning stages of rolling this out, but those are absolutely factors that we are thinking about of what is the longevity, how do we make this sustainable past that 7-year period.
Okay, I think those are just really important because this district's kind of gotten itself in a pickle with a lot of the ESSER one-time funds and a lot of great programs that we've started, but we nonetheless in 24, 25 and beyond are coming into some hard times where we're going to have some hard looks at some of that. So I just hate to see, even though it's something good, just to see us putting the district in a pickle in another way down the road.
Yes, and I think that as a district, I know with Cabinet, we've been looking at going forward, developing a new grant process because as you said, even though there's amazing opportunities out there, there's usually some kind of cost to the district, whether it's a match or in kind, or just looking at the overall sustainability. So I think going forward, with our budgets tightening, we are absolutely looking at those factors.
Well, and even how to sustain in physical spaces that we're responsible for maintaining too. That's another factor. I mean, there's so many. I mean, we could spend an hour on it, and I'm not going to do that to you, but I'll be happy to meet with you and the superintendent one-on-one, have those conversations and get more insight. And I'm going to end it with saying I want to thank you again for a wonderful presentation. It's just been amazing to see you flourish and soar in your role, and I'm so thankful as a board member to you and super appreciative because it's been a challenging year, to say the least, and your support of our district and the cabinet has been immense during this time. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. And now I will close the public hearing. And now we will move on to item 9.1, our 2023-24 Local Control Accountability Plan Revision. And this report will be presented by our Assistant Superintendent of Secondary Education, Ms. Lisa Aguirre. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, Board President Acosta, Dr. Contreras, and Board of Trustees. I'm here this evening to ask for a revision of the 23-24 LCAP. The one thing that has changed in there is the funding source for our CTE programs. In the board-adopted LCAP, the CTE programming, the majority of it came out of our base funding, which Ms. M spoke about in the last presentation. Since then, in November, there was a new indicator released on the California dashboard. It's the College Career Readiness. It's the first year that it was released. With this indicator, we were, as a district, in the low range. Because of that, the funds that we could use instead of from base, we could pull it from supplemental so that our subgroups could be supported to increase our college career readiness. And so with the revision, what it's doing is that it's taking the funds from base and instead using supplemental for our CTE programs. And with that, I'm asking for the revision of the 23-24 Local Control Accountability Plan.
Thank you, Ms. Aguirre. Do we have any public speakers this item? Seeing none, I will bring it back to the board for discussion, questions, comments, and deliberation. Trustee Bolano-Scow.
Thank you. Does that mean we got a new chunk of money?
Does not mean we have a new chunk of money. So as Ms. M presented in the last presentation, we have base funding, supplemental, and concentration. Our supplemental and concentration are focused to improve services of our outcomes of our unduplicated students. And so CTE program, because there wasn't an indicator on the California dashboard, we pulled it from our base funding source. And with this new indicator, instead we can use it from our supplemental to show that the percentage that we're using for our unduplicated to improve services. There are some other things that we use instead of out of the base grant.
So is it purely an accounting thing?
Yes, it's purely an accounting thing.
We're just saying, okay. So no new money, no less money?
No new monies, no less monies.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
Thank you, Trustee Bolano-Scow. Trustee Dr. Holm.
But does that give us more flexibility?
It does, in a sense, give us more flexibility because the supplemental and the concentration funds are harder to spend. And so it does free up more in the base, which can be spent in different ways.
Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Dr. Holm. Trustee DeSerpa.
So a lot of the CTE monies that we receive are grant funds that we apply for, correct? Much of it?
About half of it.
Half, right?
Yes.
Okay. So how much is that program to
I'd have to
run?
look in the actual item. Miss M, do you have off the top of your head our CTE program?
It can just be, you can round.
In goal 2, let me think. I want to say it's about 750,000. Yeah, in goal 2. Yeah, about 750,000.
So that would be 50% of what the,
No, 750,000 is what we spend that was out of general fund that we're moving to supplemental.
okay,
That's from the LCAP, not grants.
right. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Trustee DeSerpa. Any further deliberation from the board? All right, seeing none, I'll call for a motion.
I'll move to approve.
I have a motion.
Second?
I have a second. I have a first and a second. All those, so I will call for the vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? That will pass on a 5-0-2. Thank you, Ms.
Thank you.
Aguirre. And now we will move to 9.2, Resolution Number 23-24-50 to commit funds. And this report will be presented by our Director of Fiscal Services and Interim CBO, Ms. Im. Welcome back.
Good evening again. So this resolution is to commit those additional funds that we spoke about. So back in 16-17, the board had committed an additional 3% reserve level at 16-17 levels. So at that time, it was right around 6.8 million. Now we can see going into the 24-25 budget, the minimum 3% has increased. So in the multi-year projection, we're hovering somewhere between 9 to 10 million as the 3%. That 3% is calculated based on our general fund total expenditures. So with at the state level, the rainy day fund projected to be fully depleted by 25-26. And our budget projected to deficit spend, no new one-time dollars on the horizon at this point. I feel like it would be prudent as a district to bolster our reserves, to provide a cushion for the next years as we undergo the sustainable budget plan. So I respectfully request that the board approve this resolution to commit an additional $3.5 million to bring our additional 3% reserve to 24-25 levels.
Thank you, Ms. Im. Do we have any public speakers this item? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the board for questions, comments, and deliberation. Trustee Dr. Holm?
I know in the past we've had, pushback about this additional reserve. And I understand, with the 3% mandated reserve, how much, if there were, something happened, how long would that 3% cover the expenses of the district, even just payroll?
Days. Our monthly payroll expenditures in 23-24 out of the general fund have been around $24 million.
Okay.
Just payroll, not including any other types of expenditures. So when we look at that 3% of hovering around, $9 to $10 million, it's not even enough to cover payroll for 1 month.
So what is the advantage of having that additional savings? What benefit does that give? If it doesn't give us even 1 month of payroll, why would we go ahead and do that?
And I think what it does is it just gives us a little bit more of a cushion. So as we're approaching fully depleting our funds, we always have that additional amount committed. It's a reminder to us, hey, we're fast approaching a very dire situation, and we have this in our reserves. Another thing to remember is that our fund balance is not necessarily our cash balance. So as a school district, because our bread and butter LCFF funding, we're funded based off of a combination of property taxes and state aid and EPA. What I'm afraid of coming up once the rainy day fund is fully depleted is we might start seeing more state aid deferrals that we saw during COVID. So what that means is our cash flow is going to be impacted. So even though what we saw during COVID, during the cash deferrals, is we received an allocation, meaning we were promised an LCFF amount for that year. We did not receive the full amount in cash. So we were borrowing from other funds, and some districts were borrowing from the county office or other borrowing sources. So what this also does is it makes sure that it gives us a little extra buffer to weather possible deferrals down the line or years where our cash balance is lower than our fund balance.
So basically, it's less of a, okay, it's good, where it covers us in case of a dire, catastrophic emergency, but it's more of a breakwater for some turbulent waters. And, sorry, I had a train of thought where that was going and it just derailed. But I'll have to come back to that. Darn it.
Thank you, trustee Dr. Holm. Trustee DeSerpa.
If you remember, you can interrupt me. So I was on the board when the state pulled back a whole lot of money, and it was a very, very difficult situation. So committing this extra money into reserves, I think, is really important right now. Thank you.
Thank you, trustee DeSerpa. Trustee Flores.
Yes, like Dr. Holm had said earlier, we have gotten a little bit of pushback for this, but I'm thankful that we've had this reserve because it has put us in the position we're in now where we do have this time to really dive in deeper and look and make these hard choices, you know, with time, not overnight. So I'm thankful for these reserves that we've had that we will probably be utilizing within the next few years. So yes, I'm definitely in, I would make a motion to approve this.
Thank you, trustee Flores, and I'll take your motion to approve. Any other questions? Trustee Bolano-Scow.
Yes, thank you. So what would be the source of the 3.5 million you're asking us to move? Is it from the existing reserve?
So it's just sitting in our unrestricted fund balance. So our fund balance, it's made up of the different components of the mandated 3%, any amounts that the board is committing for special uses, and so forth.
And we're around $100 million right now on the total, and how, or just the unrestricted? I'm kind of
So just in the unrestricted, our total ending balance in 23-24 ending this year, we're projecting 56 million, but that's including about 7.5 million of those one-time savings from phase one.
And so you're saying we should take 3.5 million of that and not spend it in the 25-26 budget and put it in as a one-time thing, not in perpetuity, just a one?
It would be, this one would be in perpetuity, just like the additional reserve that we committed in 16-17. So we committed that 6.8 back in 16-17. So it's just sitting as an additional reserve. We're not adding to it each year, but it's just staying flat as an additional reserve each year. So what this resolution is doing is it's adding the 3.5 on top to bring that additional reserve to 3% of 24-25 levels. So we're not adding to it each year, it's just going to stay flat as an additional cushion.
Okay, all right. That answers my question. Thank you.
Thank you, trustee Bolano-Scow. Trustee Dr. Holm.
Train went back on the tracks. And it was the comment you made about, having that buffer so that people, sometimes in the past people have had to borrow from, other sources. Does that, by us having, those reserves for, in-house essentially, does that save us in terms of like interest, in terms of loans and things like that?
Yes, great question. Yes, we would save an interest.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, trustee Dr. Holm. Anyone else? So pretty much all my questions got answered by all the questions that were asked. The only one I would have in reference to what trustee Dr. Holm mentioned about the pushback we've gotten, and more specifically, it's been in union leadership. And I am not going to ask you to presume to speak for them, but have you had conversations with our union leadership? And again, I'm not asking you to speak for them, but if you could elaborate for us where they're at with this. Are they okay with it? Are they not okay with it?
I did speak with our PVFT leadership yesterday, and we kind of talked through some of what's coming up on the horizon and why I'm making this recommendation. I don't want to speak on her behalf,
Right.
but I do believe that we have come to an understanding, and I think more than that, I think what I've been seeing is with our unions, with CSCAP, VFT, our principals, classified staff, teachers, leadership is, since we've been talking about the sustainable budget plan, I've seen our community really come together. I can't even tell you how many times in a day I have a director or a manager come and say, hey, Jenny, I just saved us, $30,000. Dan, our tech director, actually came to me twice in like the last week. He's looking at different contracts. So I feel like every conversation I'm having, people are really rallying and pulling together. So I think going forward, my hope is, I think as a school community, we all have the same goal in mind. Providing excellent education, preserving as much staff as we can, making sure we're fiscally solvent and not getting into the position that some of these other school districts unfortunately are. So that is my hope with bolstering our reserves, that we can kind of weather this storm together going forward.
And again, I'm sorry, I did not at all want to put you in a position of trying to speak on behalf of them, but I appreciate the input and the insights that you gave to us with not just our unions, but other district members of our community, PVUSD community and leadership. That's essential. I think that transparency is the most important component that everyone's almost struggling to get used to. But is coming along. So, and they've had time to reach out to us and speak on their behalf too. So I have a first from Trustee Flores. Can I have a second?
I'll second.
I have a first and a second. So I'll call for the vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? And that will carry 601. Thank you.
Thank you.
Moving to 9.3, resolution number 23-24-51 to commit one-time funds in 24-25. And again, this report will be presented by our Director of Fiscal Services and Interim CBO, Ms. Im.
Good evening again. So this resolution is a little different than the one we just saw before. So as we saw in the budget presentation, we realized about $7.5 million in savings this year. So part of this resolution is committing $6 million of those one-time savings just for the 24-25 school year. It will be uncommitted at the end of the 24-25 school year. And the purpose of this is really to get us through this next year when we're projecting to deficit spend. We had made the commitment to our school community earlier in the year that because of our healthy and sufficient reserves, that is giving us the time to formulate a mindful, thoughtful, sustainable budget plan, that we would not be going into any layoffs this past March layoff window. So we were able to really sustain as much of the staffing as we could going into 24-25. So with this, it's essentially committing some of those savings to get us through the projected deficit spending, and then it will be uncommitted at the end of the year. So staff respectfully requests that this resolution be approved.
Thank you. Do we have any public speakers this item? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the board for questions, comments, discussion, and deliberation. Trustee Bolano-Scow.
Yeah, I'll make a motion and just on a comment on this one and then the last one, and I've said it here before and I'll say it again tonight. I feel we need to increase salaries for our classified and our teachers, especially at the lower levels. It helps with recruitment and retainment. There are districts in the Central Valley that pay higher wages that we're competing with. And I just feel it's always important, even as we right size and make the adjustments that we're gonna need to make, that the wages we do pay are improved and are competitive. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Bolano-Scow. Anyone else? Trustee DeSerpa?
I'll second.
Any other questions or comments? Or Trustee Dodge Jr.?
Just a quick comment. People do want to work for our district. People are always looking at enjoying, lawn maintenance, administrators, 2, 3. People want to work in our district. And, hopefully we can find ways, we have a lot of homegrown talent. And, hopefully we can keep getting the word out that PVUSD, you can make a living here. You can live here on the PVUSD wage. And so hopefully we continue to push that. And, we do our best to continue to support classified workers and I'd like to second the motion if,
Third it. You thirded it? Okay. Thank you, trustee Dodge Jr. And this is really, these are the, sort of, if you will, this one-time money from the savings, correct? And so granted, our district's under new leadership, but the past practice has not been to support salary increases through one-time money, right? And that's a real risky slope, isn't it?
Absolutely, and that's actually one of the biggest reasons why school districts fall into insolvency in the state.
Yeah, and so as much as I don't think there's probably one board member up here that doesn't want to get to the point where we're paying our employees a truly livable wage to live here and to work here, because there's a variety and a whole host of reasons why you want your employees to work in the community in which they live. But doing that in a sustainable manner, you know, that sustains the district and the community as a whole is important, especially when you're the second largest employer in the county and the largest employer in the city of Watsonville. So we'll see what we could do to get there, right? So I have a first and second, and trustee Dodge Jr.
just to quickly say, this year, 2 classified workers who dedicated almost 40 years are retiring this year. And so I don't want to say their names, but, you know, thank you who stuck it out, and you'll probably say their names. So
Yep.
I just want to say thank you to those classified workers.
And we are grateful for them. So I have a first, I have a second. All those in, I will call for the vote now. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? That's going to carry on a 6-0-1. Thank you, Ms. M.
Thank you.
Okay, we do not have to reconvene to close session. So next, item 11.1, board meetings. Our next board meeting is a special board meeting on Saturday, June 22nd, 24. Our next regular board meeting will be held on June 26th, 24, here in the City Council chambers. I will now adjourn this meeting at 7:48 p.m.